The vibrant hum of protest reverberated down the street, an anthem for justice echoing through the crisp morning air. In the midst of this awakened human tide stood Walter Roberts, an elderly black veteran with eyes that had witnessed too much for one lifetime. The rawness of the scene collided against the historical weight in his gaze as he faced the unexpected. A police canine unleashed from its handler's firm grip, sprinting directly toward him. The crowd inhaled sharply, anticipation slicing the air. This was another expected chapter in a long history of tension between authority and community. But as the canine neared, something shifted, an unseen force redirecting its fury. To everyone's astonishment, the dog, instead of attacking, halted in front of Walter, its tail wagging slowly, eyes meeting his with an unexpected calm. It was as if both man and beast shared a silent understanding. This was not just any moment. It was a promise of stories past and futures rewritten. Silence fell, electrifying and profound, leaving the crowd between disbelief and a whisper of hope. Who knew a canine would defy instructions, choosing compassion over aggression in a moment where humanity seemed absent? The crowd buzzed with questions, hovering in that delicate balance between relief and curiosity. In the front, feeling the scorching scrutiny of both compassion and critique, Walter stood unwavering, a monument of resilience holding secrets untold. Watching this unfold from your screen, do you feel justice stirring, or do you just see another headline? Before the protest, before the unexpected compassion of a canine, Walter Roberts had carried a burden of stories etched into the lines of his face. Stories from a lifetime poised on the knife edge of conflict. Decades ago, he was a young man sent into the boiling heart of Vietnam, a country alien in landscape, language, and war customs. The jungle, alive and threatening, had been both a battlefield and a training ground, where boys became men or died trying. Walter had emerged from that green hell not just intact but decorated, a sharpshooter with a chest full of medals marking valor where only chaos reigned. But the accolades hung heavy when he returned home to a nation where the color of his skin muted their shine. The war within, the struggle to reconcile his identity with his country's expectations, was relentless. Even before battle, the seeds of discord were sown. Mississippi, in the 1950s, knew Walter as a boy who understood his place in the racial hierarchy. The back of the bus, the different bathrooms, the knowing glances exchanged silently among his community. He'd carried these unspoken rules with him, boundaries leaving scars deeper than they realized, shaping a resolve rooted in quiet strength. When he returned from Vietnam, he found a different war still raging. There were no parades, no embraces at the airport. The bitterness of his cousins drove him into the realm of advocacy, becoming a voice for those themselves too weary to speak. Marches, rallies, and sit-ins became his new battlefield, every inch of progress hard-won and fiercely protected. Marriage and children followed. They were bright spots amid turbulence, though overshadowed by systemic prejudices that morphed with the times but never faded. Through it all, Walter persevered, teaching his son and daughter the complexities of being black and proud in America, a heritage marked by grace and grit. Perhaps it was his history, a lifetime marching against and around prisons both real and metaphorical, that shaped his response to the canine lunging toward him. In that moment of tension and fear, his instinct was not flight or fight, but understanding, a silent communion, correcting a misconception far too entrenched. The dog, like Walter, seemed to recognize something familiar, perhaps the soldier beneath the skin, the sense of shared service. Within his community, Walter's voice resonated like a seasoned pastor's, one who preached not to convert, but to empower. The people knew him as a pillar adorned in dignity, weathered by storms. Through countless encounters, tense, charged, arbitrary, his response was the same: a quiet representation of justice, less about the law and more about the collective conscience of a people bonded by shared struggle. Walter's personal history was indelibly linked to a broader narrative, the fight for dignity on home shores after surviving its theft abroad. The day in the protest was no mere anomaly for him. It was an extension of a legacy forged from bravery in the face of bigotry. Unflappable in demeanor, stalwart in vision, Walter Roberts' past was written not just in action, but in the very breath he shared with an unpredictable world waiting for its next canine or battleground to confront. Walter didn't flinch, for he had faced many a dog that would bite. Yet, here was one that didn't. Here was proof in the dog's quiet rebellion that maybe, just maybe, histories could change and futures might follow. What would you do, watching from the comfort of distance, if you too saw history repeating? The air was still crisp with the aftermath of what everyone had witnessed. An extraordinary deviation from expectation. A police canine choosing stillness over aggression. News of the encounter spread like wildfire through both social media and word of mouth, igniting a vehement chorus of outrage and disbelief in the community. The whispers became a roar, demanding justice not just for Walter, but for a legacy of similar injustices that had simmered too long beneath the surface. Outside City Hall, the community gathered with banners that fluttered higher than their spirits had in years. The slogans screamed for justice, and in the center of the throng, Walter stood resilient. Respected yet worn, he was the face of their cause, relating their demands with the calm composure of someone who had long navigated the unstable waters of protest and politics. The rallying cry was clear: accountability. The people had grown weary of turning the other cheek, tired of their grievances being dismissed by those who wielded power against them. The K9 incident wasn't an isolated event. It was symptomatic of a deep-seated mistrust bred by decades of systemic neglect and overt hostility. In the days that followed, it wasn't just neighbors and activists who joined the protest, but individuals from all walks of life, unified in their shared craving for transparency and community leaders met in packed halls. Public spaces thrumming with a consensus that vibrated through each person present. This wasn't merely about a dog who refused to play its expected role. This was about voices, those long silenced and ignored, now raised in a ragged chorus that refused to be patronized or pacified. Their demands took shape: the immediate suspension of the officers involved, a thorough investigation into police practices, and, most importantly, a larger probe into the systemic inequalities that persisted within their city. What started as whispers of discontent quickly became structured demands articulated in petitions and vocalized in city council meetings. Local politicians found themselves besieged by phone calls and emails from constituents they could no longer afford to overlook. The phrase "justice for Walter" became more than a call to action. It was a mantra for transformation. Walter found himself in countless interviews, his voice a mix of steadfast resolve and emotional fatigue. Each question, while probing, only fortified his stance. He was not a new martyr. He was an old warrior, re-entering a battle he'd never truly left. He spoke not with bitterness, but with an authority drawn from lived experience, reminding everyone that this was about much more than one man. It was about generations demanding their long-overdue rights. "It's time we stop waiting for lawful change and start making it happen," Walter asserted during one late-night town hall meeting, his voice resonating against the room's tired architecture. "We don't just want an apology, we want accountability. And we will keep pressing until it's given." Fueled by the people's ire and rejuvenated by Walter's quietly fierce leadership, the movement intensified. Murals of "Marching Together Forever" popped up around towns, painted by local artists to capture this moment of unity and defiance. The streets reverberated with chants, feet pounding pavement in solidarity, amplified renditions of the struggles encapsulated by Walter's journey. As external pressure escalated, the city council struggled to maintain a facade of control against a now heightened scrutiny. This unity, forged from the boycotts and sit-ins of a previous generation, was sturdy. No longer could the administration dismiss these events as isolated, nor explain them away with hollow promises of reform. Walter, enduring the media glare and weight of communal responsibility, remained a steadfast symbol against whom no resistance could prevail. He was the harbinger of their message. Systemic abuse must end, so that future generations do not inherit a legacy of silence sown with fear. In the burgeoning movements, nascent energy and unavoidable truth emerged. Systemic change was often birthed from collective resilience, witnessed in unity amid adversity. And just as the dog had stopped, perhaps sensing the ties that bind man and beast to understanding, the city would have to pause, to listen, and to answer a community without patience for more convenient placation. Were you among the onlookers thrust into discomfort, or those awakened to action, each carrying an indelible part of the change's echo? The community's demands were clear, but navigating the churning waters of city politics proved to be its own battle. Behind the grand facade of City Hall, gears of bureaucracy creaked slower than the urgency dictated by the public. Amidst the opulent paneled corridors, city officials huddled, a muted council of apprehension and compliance, burdened by the specter of accountability they so often evaded. City Manager Paul Ellison, a man known for his slick politics and penchant for maintaining the status quo, stood at the helm of this operation. Guided less by morality and more by survival, he had shepherded the city through previous storms, weathering discontent with the careful application of platitudes. At this impasse, however, was something intangible and new, a fire that wouldn't be dulled by mere promises. He knew the incident had struck a chord that reverberated well beyond the city's borders. The unexpected canine incident with Walter Roberts was drawing attention in places strategic for Paul's career. The narrative of a veteran unjustly wronged struck a universal nerve. It was becoming increasingly clear that any misstep could blanket his leadership under relentless scrutiny and political jeopardy. In clandestine corners of power, meetings convened, official yet unofficial, shrouded in the shadows of pragmatic expediency. Legal advisors presented cautious words, outlining the advantages of maintaining the veneer of justice and cooperation without actually committing to significant systemic changes. There was, after all, the powerful police union to contend with, an entity of influence and intimidation not easily swayed or served. Among these clandestine discussions surfaced the notion of delay. Legal entanglements and investigations could be protracted, inquiries shackled in red tape, satisfying on paper the clamor for action while strategically stalling genuine reform. Paul and his advisors whispered enticing phrases of cost-benefit analyses, codifying justice against budgets and votes, but whispers have a way of traveling caught in the wind of an enraged populace. Community leaders, seasoned in resistance, anticipated such maneuvers. They had seen how wordsmithing and paperwork could grind momentum to a halt, how promises could become inertia's tool. Yet their conviction was as immovable as bureaucratic resolve was cynical. Standing beside a wall of carefully stacked legal papers, a young attorney, Sheila Martin, listened as the officials plotted. Having infiltrated the layers of bureaucratic deceit, Sheila had a reputation for her tenacity in justice's pursuit. Despite the risk, she leaked pertinent documents to the coalition, illuminating the city's plans in the harsh light of public scrutiny. The clarity of the city's intentions, laid bare in emails and memos, poured fuel upon an already roaring fire. Angered citizens doubled down. Petitions thicker than legal tomes appeared, swelling with signatures that pinned the city council to a moral corner. There was no escaping the people's watchful eye, not when young Sheila promised to hold their feet to the flames. Paul Ellison stepped hesitantly onto the dais at a press conference, eyes shielded against the hostility of truth. Clad in a suit polished to a sheen that belied the city's unrest, his words rolled off the tongue with an almost practiced sincerity. "We are committed to a thorough and meticulous inquiry," he assured, carefully avoiding the direct gaze of journalists whose pens poised like weapons, poised to skewer deception. Still, the law of public opinion was loud and irrefutable. The protest had evolved into a larger movement. Banners blocked highways, chants punctured the calm of suburban neighborhoods, and the march of feet never ceased their enunciated persistence. The city officials' tactics of delay, once formidable, crumbled rapidly under the relentless pressure of a united front. In every strategic retreat and sidestepped answer, the officials found themselves deeper entrenched in the mistakes of their own machinations. This wasn't scandal relegated to dusty headlines filed away. It was legacy in the making, recorded in real time across every platform of communication. As Paul slunk back into his office, heart pounding in time with the chants outside, he realized that he was not just facing losing control of the narrative, but also his place in the public's trust. For out there, Walter and his allies were rewriting the scripts with ink that refused to fade, demanding more than surface-level accountability, clamoring for the roots of systemic prejudice and injustice to be unearthed and dealt with. Behind his office window, a sea of voices rose higher, anchored in purpose, steadfast in their demands. The skins of the city's officials tingled with the chilling premonition that silence was no longer an option. Would the halls of power hear their call, or would they remain deafened by their hubris? And thus, the stage was set for a confrontation between festering past and unyielding present, a battle of wills where survival depended on more than rhetoric, but genuine change. What side would you champion amid the simmering kettle of discontent? From the chaos of collective voices and protests, a singular voice emerged, firm yet unyielding. Sheila Martin, the young attorney who had first exposed the city's duplicity, now positioned herself at the forefront of the legal battle for justice. She was a local, someone who understood the cadence of her community's pain and shared in their vision for a brighter future. Her presence was a spark in the shadowed theater of oppression, her words a litany of defiance as she took on a case many believed to be insurmountable against entrenched power. In a small, bustling office that thrummed with the energies of determination and latent revolution, Sheila gathered a team of legal volunteers. They were a scrappy bunch, recent grads, community organizers, paralegals who worked by day and dreamt of justice by night. These torchbearers studied every statute with an unwavering eye, consolidating evidence and testimonies that wrapped every city official in the stark illumination of public accountability. "We're not just fighting for Walter," Sheila reminded them during their late-night strategy sessions, fueled by caffeine and idealism. "We're fighting for everyone who's ever been told they don't matter, for every case that's been swept under the rug." Walter himself was a somber yet animated presence, his life the cornerstone of their crusade. He sat at their meetings, recounting his past not just as memories but as testaments to ongoing resilience. He was fuel for a machine that ran on belief as much as on legislation. His stories provided not only context but conviction, their historical weight bolstering the case against inert reform. In the coming days, Sheila presented their motion to the court, the city's attempts to delay proceedings countered with sharp legal arguments that underscored the immediacy of justice over legislative lassitude. The courtroom, traditionally a stage for the sterile and unemotional exchange of facts, became a battleground for emotion, passion, filtered through the sieve of cold logic. "Your Honor, this is not just a case of mishandled civil responsibilities." Sheila's opening argument was a clarion call to arms, but a call to examine an entire system that has, for too long, operated with impunity against those it is sworn to protect. As each city attorney rose to counter her claims with polished rebuttals filled with legalese meant to obfuscate rather than clarify, Sheila countered with clarity and purpose. Her arguments cut through the fog of procedure with precise, pointed questions. She wielded her truths like a scalpel, dissecting the lies that had poisoned city policy for years. One by one, those in power found themselves on unfamiliar ground, corners of their carefully constructed facades crumbling under Sheila's relentless attention to detail and her resilient faith in procedural justice. Each attempt to deflect or delay was met with the irrefutable evidence of documents like those she had leaked, The community's voice resounded through every page she presented as evidence. Outside the courthouse, the protest persisted, each gathering a crescendo of support echoing within the walls as a reminder of what was at stake. Their hope, once whispered in darkened rooms, now was shouted from rooftops and social media platforms worldwide. Walter, a stoic figure amidst this spiraling storm, reflected the myriad histories he represented. An unlikely alliance had answered his silence, each word spoken on his behalf, amplifying the narrative of countless unsung heroes. His image had become more than a symbol. It was a catalyst, driving their insistence for tangible change. The city's walls, initially impenetrable fortresses of bureaucratic indifference, began to show cracks, as public documents revealed further instances of mismanagement under the guise of ignorance and pretension. Each revelation built pressure against the keystones of institutional apathy, the city council forced into a reckoning they could neither deny nor deflect. Sheila stood before microphones after each hearing, her face calm but her words an unwavering herald of the cause. This is more than just a moment for justice. It's the birth of a new accountability. In the press that followed, Walter's smile broke momentarily, beckoned by a lifetime of inquisition. Sheila, in him, witnessed reflections of past victories and unspoken losses, the stories he carried, not for himself, but for the unity he inspired. Their shared journey continued, now irrevocably a testament to what happens when an unyielding spirit intersects with opportunity. The courtroom remained a battlefield, Sheila at its center, wielding her knowledge, her determination, and her belief in the face of entrenched power structures. In this battle, it wasn't just a community that held its breath, but a nation waiting to see if justice could indeed prevail. Were your eyes, too, wide with hope, waiting breathlessly for history to shift? In the midst of tactical maneuvering and legal skirmishes, another story began to unravel. A story within the shadows of police procedures and the canine that had defied its handler's command. The unexpected detente in the streets that day had been a moment of quiet rebellion, a divergence that begged explanation. The answer, as it turned out, lay in the elaborate and often unseen world of police canine training, a world tangled in its own moral ambiguity. The canine in question, a German shepherd named Razor, belonged to a program considered both prestigious and problematic, renowned for producing combat-ready dogs, often conditioned more by fear than by loyalty. Razor, however, bore a history unlike his peers, a past narrative steeped in the compassion both present and absent among his handler. Years before his fateful encounter with Walter, Razor had been part of an experimental, empathy-based training program, temporarily helmed by a trainer named Officer Carla Espinoza, a maverick with radical ideas about duty and companionship. Her approach centered on understanding rather than conditioning, positing that empathy, even in a creature as seemingly duty-bound as a police dog, could lead to more balanced law enforcement. With Razor, Carla had achieved a remarkable rapport. They formed a bond, shrouded in mutual respect, transcending the simple commands and responsive model that defined typical human canine partnerships. Carla wielded understanding as her principal tool, affirming that intuition sometimes outstripped instruction in effective policing. Ignored or misunderstood by her peers, Carla's tenure was short-lived, her methods dismissed as impractical in a system loath to change. As the program reverted to its traditional model, Razor remained behind, a complex beast with learnt empathy overshadowed by new training sessions that demanded predictable aggression. Yet the threads of old lessons lingered. Quiet notes struck amid cacophonous shouts for obedience. On that fateful day amidst the protest, when Razor found himself torn between command and comprehension, it was Carla's voice echoing in his memory more than the strident shouts of his current handler. In Walter's steadfast stance, Razor had detected an energy familiar and humane, a shout of understanding louder than any command to attack. Razor's curious hesitance was more than a breach of protocol. It was an expression of awareness and silent solidarity. His action, or rather his inaction, underlined the potential for reform hidden within the very ranks of law enforcement folklore, that beneath every uniform, every programmed command, was a capacity for individual discernment long neglected. As this narrative reached the public, it became magnified by dozens of stories about Razor's gentle interventions, documented instances where his training had gone gloriously unnoticed, children calmed in frantic crowds, fleeing suspects cornered but unscathed. Each story echoed the transformative power of empathy over rote discipline. Officer Carla, upon hearing about Razor's unexpected reveal, couldn't suppress a spark of vindication fluttering beneath her fierce gaze. "Dogs see who we pretend not to be," she whispered to a colleague one afternoon, savoring the irony of Razor's quiet rebellion. In the confines of her small office, she penned down reminders of her initial successes, proof positive of an approach dismissed too readily by those measuring success in captures rather than connections made. Within the precinct's ranks, Razor's reputation grew, a silent flashpoint for discussions about training reforms and evaluations using benchmarks beyond arrests and subjections. Officers began to whisper amongst themselves, some remembering Carla's words with newfound respect. They reconsidered how to evaluate a K-9's performance, raising a vital question. Were they harnessing the best traits these animals possessed? And in the city beyond, Walter Roberts and his allies realized that their fight was gaining dimensions they hadn't predicted. The story of Razor and Carla added a profound layer to their battle against systemic wrongs, showcasing possibility within the structures they fought to transform. This tale of unexpected friendships and historical shadows, too, spread far and wide, urging old beasts and new defenders alike to rethink norms governing order and obedience. Razor became a catalyst for reconsidering the very fabric of human-animal solidarity in roles traditionally defined by division rather than union. Amidst it all, Sheila Martin poised for their next legal feud, now armed with evidence sharper than any sword. A dog that taught humanity better than its handlers could command. In the gaze of Walter and community, what lay apparent was not just hope, but a spark, the desire to witness these silent lessons echo loud and lasting. Does this understanding reach you? In the depths of your own guarded assumptions, urging re-evaluation of the world's oldest institutions and norms? The stories of Razor and his defiance ushered in a tidal wave of scrutiny that inundated the police department. A once staunch and seemingly impenetrable bastion of authority found itself under a microscope. The tale of an empathetic canine and an intuitive trainer sent ripples of introspection through a force that had long hidden behind the veneer of unchallenged power and routine procedure. Behind the double doors of the precinct, there was an unease reminiscent of soldiers caught in the unexpected crossfire. Officer Carla Espinoza, now revivified by the spotlight cast upon her discarded methods, was called in as an unexpected consultant. The commanders, grudgingly accommodating, had no choice but to consider what had once been dismissed. Her theories, once whispered in derision, were quickly becoming the talk of reform committee. Carla's return disrupted the precinct's status quo. Her insights into the department's practices reflected gleaming truths often overlooked. She didn't shy away from confronting her colleagues. "We've trained silence into their barks," she said of the K-9S, her voice steady but loaded with the weight of experience. "And maybe in doing so, we've compliance and containment, once the force's cornerstones, now teetered under new testimonies, and with them cracked the forceful rhetoric of defensive officers." Senior officers filed into meeting rooms, with brows knitted in displays of uncomfortable introspection. They were faced with hard metrics and newly unearthed videos, revealing continued patterns of excessive force, giving the public more than ample justification to demand significant change. The local press skyrocketed these revelations into national discourse. Headlines spoke not of isolated incidents, but of a systematic failure to reintegrate empathy into law enforcement practices. Editorials breached topics long considered fringe or indulgent. They explored data linking police conduct to training methodologies, and even broader ideological reforms. As the swell of public opinion grew, officers within the department faced personal crises of conscience. Some embraced the newfound focus, envisioning a future where their role wasn't reactionary but preventive, where valor meant intervention before harm, not just arrest after. Others, however, greeted these ideas with skepticism, discomforted by the shift from the familiar black and white paradigm they'd long relied upon. No longer could the department mask its vulnerabilities under the guise of tight procedure and blue solidarity. The stark spotlight revealed the human underneath every badge, a cautious reminder that every decision born from fearfulness tended to breed more of the same cycles. And in Walter Roberts, in Razor, in Carla, they saw both the challenges and possibilities waiting should they choose to listen. Walter continued to stand as a rallying point, his presence a ceaseless reminder of the battles won through patience and perspective. His story was now entwined with the larger movement questioning the efficacy and humanity of entrenched practices. His shadow slimmed for accommodation not just of empathy, but of rational reevaluation of beliefs long held unexamined. The arrival of national journalists brought fresh eyes and hearts determined to uncover either the potential demise of departmental ethics or the seeds of regenerative future capability. What transpired within the police department wasn't happening in isolation. It was a microcosmic reflection of broader societal tremors urging introspection at even the loftiest halls of government. The city scrambled in damage control mode, schedules brimming with forums intended to address citizen concerns, which had by then paled beside the fiery demands now filling them. The city council meetings morphed into fervent eruptions of communal narrative, people charged with experiences akin to firebrands illuminating the darkness of standard praxis. Officer Carla, now a figurehead amongst advocates for institutional change, took to these stages alongside Sheila, her voice resonating with the truth of reform and possibility. Documents once confined to dusty shelves emerged as linchpins for future policy, considerations proof that transformation was feasible if only given space and legitimacy to grow. Somewhere amid the tumult, beneath the roiling surface, a new understanding started to emerge, a potential pathway not of mere compliance, but collaboration, not of hierarchy, but holism. Whether it would crystallize into something lasting, something profound, lay in the willing hands and collective hearts of those finally getting what it meant to stand in Walter's shoes. In light of the police under scrutiny, and this inexorable march towards systemic change, can you see the lines of understanding starting to shift in your own perspectives, urging you to question, to hope, to act? Within the quietude of his modest home, Walter Roberts found himself facing demons that the public's gaze could not dispel. Up until now, the protests, courtroom dramas, and introspective upheavals within the police department had kept his mind engaged, a tidal wave of activity that had distracted from the more profound personal battles he faced alone. Yet, in the rare moments of solitude, when the chants outside dissipated into distant murmurs, Walter was alone with the scars of his past. The evening shadows stretched across his living room, echoing memories indelibly etched into his being. The jungle canopy of Vietnam, the chaos of combat intermingled with moments of stark, almost laughable absurdity. Those tangible recollections of war, sandwiched between periods of camaraderie and loss, came flooding back with every news broadcast and court update, reminding him of conflicts both forgotten and remembered. But it wasn't just the past battles that haunted him. It was the associative ties between then and now, the echo of wartime racism, which mirrored the day-to-day discriminations he faced in the land he fought to defend. The eyes of the indifferent that had greeted him upon his return seemed the same ones staring with skepticism at him now, asking, without saying, why he strayed from the expected path of quiet submission. His family, while a source of immeasurable strength, also guarded wounds made fresh with each retelling of a history written in struggle. Every conversation with his children and grandchildren carried the weight of a legacy he didn't want, but had to shoulder, ensuring they understood the cost of silent survival and the importance of resilience. They learned not just from his stories, but from his unwavering resolve, a living testament to the perseverance hidden beneath his beaten exterior. Walter's nights were not restful respites, but battlegrounds of forgotten dreams and flared tempers, where the anger of injustices faced threatened the edges of his composure. He was a man endlessly perforated by the needs of a cause larger than he, interrupted not merely in sleep, but in thought, encroached upon by a past requiring taming. He remembered his therapy sessions back in the ADS, mandatory meetings designed to stitch the rifts between soldier and civilian. They had failed him then, with their coldly academic approaches to uniquely visceral experiences, yet here he was, standing steadfast under these blooming introspections, the raw edges of conflicted pride and regret interwoven tightly beneath his skin. To the world outside, Walter was a beacon, a force of integrity and hope. To the world within, diminished echoes of gunfire competed with the clarity of current strife. But his turmoil had its function. Though armed with fear, it was more importantly girded by the prospect of change, an ember set alight by the realization that his struggles were not weathered alone, but shared amidst a collective, storming the walls of long-standing prejudice. As his thoughts navigated this spectrum of feeling, the phone rang, a comforting interruption from the undertows of introspection. On the line was Sheila, her voice a fresh stream over parched fears, telling him of new legal strategies and community testimonials readying for court. "We need your voice, Walter," she expressed, clear determination threading through her encouragement. "They need to hear what this has truly cost, straight from you. It's time we push back with everything." A deep sigh escaped Walter, not of reluctance but of readiness, and with it came a determination divine in its simplicity. Speaking was never a gift, he claimed, but he comprehended the power of words, voiced into the world's chaotic ether, each sentence a brush stroke painting the yet-to-be-realized canvas of equitable tomorrows. Their meeting, set for the next dawn, would initiate a new chapter, not solely of external fights, but harnessing the voices of past and present to empower change. Even as the darkness ensconced his dwellings, a solitary light remained, one not confined to his home's lamplight, but residing within, illuminating the truths he's yet to fully articulate. Thus, Walter braced himself, akin to soldiers preparing for battle, resolved to carry the torn banners of yesterday towards the promise of sunrise, knowing the globe waited to hear his invincible heart beat through the tumultuous silence, insistent on blazing new trails. Do you hear the echoes of his steadfast march, breaking your own silences, imbibing you with courage to face battles both old and new? The sun rose with a tentative warmth on the day the protest movement transcended into something more powerful than the organizers had ever envisioned. The march had been planned with intricate precision, the route mapped, speeches drafted, chants rehearsed, but the heart, that distinctive rhythm of grassroots movements, beat irregular and strong, propelling a swarming mass of purpose into the city center. Walter joined the protest early, his presence a cornerstone that grounded everyone around him. As the day unfolded, the crowd swelled in number and intensity, diverse in demographics yet unified in resolve. Here were students, elders, families, and activists, folks from neighboring towns and distant cities who all carried signs in solidarity and voices itching for choral opposition. People gathered at designated meeting points, their placards soaring against the brightening sky. The air was electric, charged not just with protest but with hope, as palpable as the pavement beneath their feet. As the procession wound its way through the heart of the city, it gobbled streets with rhythmic insistence. A living mural of change unstoppable in momentum. Walter walked amongst them, feeling the tentative joy threading through shared grievances. He was both participant and witness to this grand tapestry of human determination, an artwork painted with resilience, frustration, and unquenchable hope. At the protest's core, the movement transcended spectacle, morphing into a living, breathing entity, a force that thrummed with every participant's heartbeat. The chants began with familiar refrains, calls for justice echoing against towering building walls, a collective melody spiraling upwards like a desperate prayer lifted by 1,000 voices. New songs emerged from the old, new leaders took up the megaphones, adding harmonies to the rights demanded. "We want justice, not just sympathy," an electrified chorus punched through the air, a slogan that ignited their hearts and propelled their feet forward. These simple words broke past barriers language had once erected, conveying everything about oppression's weight and the demand for redress. As the march approached the sprawling steps of City Hall, the space around it transformed into an amphitheater of revolution. The crowd, once scattered, coalesced before the building, refusing to back down. Here, where the protests turned inward, standing beneath the symbols of civic governance, the volume crescendoed, rebounding from glass and steel with renewed fervor. Sheila, undeterred by the clamor, took her place at the forefront, a figure of unyielding determination elevated upon a makeshift stage. Her voice cut through the cacophony like a shepherd guiding his flock, imbibing the air with conviction as she laid bare their struggle, hopes, and demands, alight with clarity and commitment. Today isn't an end nor a beginning. Her declarations sliced with precision. Today is an evolution, the living embodiment of our forebears' dreams. We've reached a reckoning of our own making, and we refuse to relent until justice is made manifest across this land. Her words wove with potency, but it was Walter who followed her, stepping into the full, gravid silence that fell as she beckoned him to the forefront. The crowd parted like a sea, his presence invoked with reverence and anticipation. In that moment, Walter was more than a protester, veteran, or even symbol. He was history breathing its truths forward. Draped quietly in the armor of shared hardship and longing for change, he paused, surveying the sea of expectant faces. The tumultuous ocean of humanity hushed, but roaring with expectation. It wasn't the accolades of his past service that fueled him now, but this moment, when his voice could unfurl everyday stories long whispered in darkened corners, stories that now threaded into the tapestry of resistance. "Tomorrow is ours to shape with hands forged from unity," he began, his voice deep yet firm, each word a brick paving the path to justice. "Together we stand for every father and mother, every child, every dreamer told they could not reach the sky because wings are meant for others." From City Hall's granite steps, his hope remonstrated against the gathering clouds of old ideology still seeking dominion, a storm of resistance matched by the stillness of centuries unyielded. Walter's words painted the streets in vibrant strokes of necessary truth, reverberating into the ears of those stationed far beyond their physical reach. In the symphonic silence that absorbed Walter's rallying call, a new chant arose, tongues moved by the echoes of deeds and unmet wishes. They were a community unified by purpose, woven tighter by shared truths they themselves could mold, binding them into an unshakable fortress against inequity. And so, under the benevolent sky, they concluded not an era, but defined it, a living legacy charted through determined footsteps and verses spoken by stalwarts of justice. Do you sense the thrumming anthem calling from afar, inviting you to step forward and carry its resonant truths within you? The march had rekindled flames of defiance, but amidst the fervor, allies emerged from the least likely of places. Within the very institution they challenged, a sole voice whispered truth, a whisper that would soon grow into a gale that couldn't be ignored. Lieutenant Frank Donovan had spent over 2 decades rising through the ranks of the very police department now embroiled in controversy. He was well respected for his diligence and was known to possess a moral compass that often pointed more strongly toward justice than protocol. Frank was not usually a man of rash actions, but something about the recent events with the K-9 incident and subsequent revelations gnawed at him. The system he was part of seemed to be fraying, revealing gaps where blind enforcement overpowered rightful equality. For years, he'd observed quietly, rationalizing small indiscretions as isolated flaws, each instance tucked away in the private vault of his conscience. Yet the accumulation had grown into an unignorable weight that begged action. In Walter's story, he saw not just a man wronged, but a truth that spoke to the rotting core beneath the surface veneer of public service. One sleepless night, as the city echoed with the protests and the cries for change, Frank made a decision that could shatter not only his career but the illusions that held the status quo intact. He quietly gathered documents, reports, internal memos, training manuals, all of which painted a damning picture of the systemic practices he'd long justified. Armed with these, he sought out Sheila, the young lawyer who spurred this revolutionary tide with uncompromising fervor. Their meeting was clandestine. Beneath the cloak of darkness, they convened in a simple cafe on the outskirts of town, Negro ground where judgment could be suspended in the face of greater purpose. The mood was tense, but Frank's heart swelled with a resolve unclouded by fear. When Sheila arrived, eyes embodying the fierce determination that had become synonymous with the cause, she found not an adversary, but an ally, ready to unburden himself for the greater good. "I have something you need to see," Frank said, sliding the pile of files across the table, his eyes steeled with the resolve of confessional sincerity. Sheila glanced at the documents. Her breath caught not in trepidation, but in anticipation. Each paper was a keystone, tangible proof to bolster their battle. Her seasoned eyes processed the scope quickly, a tapestry of negligence and discriminatory practices laid bare. "Hey now, Frank," she questioned, though her tone held not scorn but curiosity, a desire to understand the man who had placed so much on the line. "Because silence serves only the status quo," Frank answered simply, each word deliberate. "And maybe it's time I listen less to the comfort of compliance and more to the echo of conscience." His voice didn't waver. It simply exhaled conviction. For Sheila, the truth within those pages was watershed, transforming their fight from a grassroots movement into a formidable legal juggernaut. With these insights, the systemic problems had fingers touching every rationale she had previously argued. It all fit seamlessly into a larger picture of needed reform. The meeting concluded with an understanding, a partnership forged in the crucible of necessary change. Frank left with the quiet satisfaction that he was now part of a pivotal realignment, stepping into the light of transparency after navigating many a shadowed corridor. As she walked back through the dimly lit street, the weight of the new evidence both sobering and empowering, Sheila felt not only invigorated but affirmed in her pursuit. Here was an ally sculpted from the very stone of the fortress they sought to dismantle, proof that even within structures seemingly impervious to change lay seeds of transformation. With this new information, Walter and his community would not merely echo cries for justice, but hammer the system with the weight of realities too long suppressed. It was a powerful alliance, one that bound the ideals of truth and the need for systemic justice under a unified banner. And so, under the moonlit expanse of an awakening city, words etched in reform and reconciliation promised to reshape tomorrow, a new chapter soon to be unfurled within the annals of a justice long delayed but never forgotten. Do you observe the ripples of bravery echoing in your own circle, urging untold solidarities to emerge from unexpected places? Amidst the revelations and ripples of justice set into motion by Lieutenant Frank Donovan's courageous decision, another formidable force took to the front lines, the relentless vigilance of the press. Among those imbued with the mission of unveiling hidden truths was Tanner Brooks, an investigative journalist whose instincts had been piqued by the unfolding saga in Walter Roberts City. Tanner was a veteran of such battles, his career a trail of exposures where light was shed on the otherwise impenetrable basements of human avarice and their fortified corridors of power. He arrived in town with a sharp eye and the tenacity of a bloodhound, intent on unearthing every desperate claw mark of a system fighting to remain unchallenged. In the chaotic dance of the newsroom, digitized mountains of documents, leads, and allegations cascaded onto his desk, a digital tapestry picking through the threads of societal injustice. Razor's story, Walter's silent protest, the empathic peaks from a decaying system, their lines all wove into a confluence of questions, each demanding exploration. Tanner found allies in strange places, tired clerks who whispered legends of unmissed reports left to molder, whistleblowers burdened by integrity, and even Carmen, the precinct's receptionist, whose access to the labyrinthine storage rooms of the department was previously deemed inconsequential. As Tanner meticulously connected these narratives, He became the pen writing history in tandem with those forging it in the streets. He began tracing previous incidents, digging through old newspaper archives, mismatched records, and barely legible handwritten notes. Patterns emerged through the lens of systemic loyalty turned predatorial ferocity, a tapestry of unchecked power perpetuating cycles familiar but undocumented until now. One night, as rain gusted against his office window, Tanner stumbled upon a near-forgotten file involving multiple incidents, traffic stops, petty arrests, suspicious use of excessive force. They were unlinked until now, invisible threads stretching across years and geography, woven into a silencing tapestry. With the collaborative zeal of his investigation and those from Frank's exposed files, Tanner began to draft an article. Each sentence became a scalpel, peeling back layers of imaginings the public had taken as concrete truths about their protectors. It was more than a story. It was an unveiling, a reframing of foundational narratives. The article's publication was a tempest unleashed. Digital presses hammered their keyboards, sending ripples along wireless highways. Human discourse pinged in invisible pathways, echoing across the country and beyond. Walter's story, anchored at its heart, resonated powerfully, but with a terrifying beauty. The journalist illustrated a comprehensive indictment of a system that had too often skewed justice under the false banner of protection. The media's presence became felt not just on airwaves, but in the heightened vigilance of a global audience. Human rights groups clamored upon this spotlighted staging, leading global voices to chime into the concerto of societal dialogue. This was no longer a local affair, but an international narrative demanding to unfurl. Amidst this noise, the police department, city hall, and those empires fortified by local government found themselves scrambling. Even those who had been reluctant to scrutinize the status quo began asking deeper questions, spurred by an awakening that could not be confined. The spotlight illuminated choices and sacrifices hidden for too long. Walter saw this from his kitchen table, watching the news on an old TV crackling with age. His hands trembled slightly. Not with fear, but with a recognition of potential. The dreams he carried for his children and their peers looked to finally birth forth from the shadows of whispered congregations and into proactive resolve. Tanner's investigation became more than a blistering condemnation. It was a blueprint for change, a remonstration fixed not merely on people, but the policies they allowed to grow unchecked beneath them. The world now witnessed what Walter's community had felt for so long. Wrongs engraved in silence, now peeling back to reveal neglected truths. The journalist had done more than uncover hidden stories. Tanner had channeled voices yearning to be heard, providing justice not just a face, but an indomitable spirit. In the courtroom, in city streets, in homes once voiceless, a question resounded unhindered. Would this elevation of awareness translate into real, lasting change? Can you feel the awakening around you now, the stories beneath stories, urged into recognition, attuning your senses to whispers of institutional truth, echoing where they once disappeared unheard? The day of the courtroom clash dawned with an air so charged it seemed to hum with anticipation, like the opening scenes of a drama where every player awaited their cue, knowing their roles might redefine the play itself. The courthouse stood solemnly against the morning light, its columns casting shadows reminiscent of ancient traditions, eternal yet ripe for re-evaluation. Inside, the atmosphere was tense with the whisperings of destiny. Among the murmuring crowd sat Walter, a stoic figure flanked by Sheila and her team, each lawyer poised like archers with truth-loaded bows. News of the police department's internal struggles and revelations uncovered by Tanner Brooks' diligent investigation had set the stage for this moment, turning what might have been a mere proceeding into a battleground of justice and redemption. The entrance of city attorneys drew ripples of suppressed tension through the room. Their resolve was palpable. But so too was the palpable anxiety threading their steps, as if they marched not only toward legal contestation, but against a force whose integrity resonated far beyond procedural deflection or obfuscation. The proceedings began with the predictable rhythms of court decorum. each side presenting opening statements meant to outline truths bonded to their cause. Yet from the onset, Sheila's words cut deeper than rehearsed rhetoric. Her voice was an axe parsing dogma from fidelity, every syllable imbued with an urgency impossible to ignore. This case extends beyond procedural infraction into the systemic implementation of bias, Sheila declared, her gaze a scalpel dissecting the pretense of mere judicial happenstance. It calls into question every facet of how we define justice in our community. Her argument presented not just incidents, but a living jury of changed perspectives, underscoring Tanner's findings, Frank's bravery, and the unyielding narrative Walter bore with grace beneath an age-old armor. The city's defense rose thereafter, adhering to the letter of law tempered by the weight of public scrutiny. They attempted to paint the incidents as regrettable but isolated, the actions of individuals not indicative of broader systemic corruption. Yet Sheila was prepared. She methodically dismantled every attempt to minimize accountability by shifting focus from individual cases, presenting data that told a story of institutional neglect and malpractice spanning decades, a tapestry of profiling, misuse of power, and blind obedience unfurled within her narrative, overwhelming the defense's insistence on navigating through convenient loopholes and technicalities. But it was Frank Donovan's testimony that became the fulcrum on which the scales seemed to tip. Taking the stand, his figure a silhouette of moral fortitude, Frank spoke not merely of findings or facts, but of experiences, an inner conflict wrestling its way into articulate truth. "I've seen both sides," he offered, his voice tempered with an authenticity that resonated beyond the courtroom. "I've seen what integrity demands, and how silence can poison from within. We have to do better, not just for Walter or Razor, but for the community we swore to serve." His admission crafted an emotional, tangible link between the case's broader implications and its immediate human impact, an impact reverberating across the faces of those seated, those watching, and those yet to believe change was within reach. Tanner's compelling evidence, woven through his articles and testimonies from other witnesses, fortified this perception. Together, they illuminated the courtroom not solely with fact, but with the specter of repeated wrongdoing now bravely unleashed. After hours of deliberation and detailed cross-examinations, the hearing adjourned for the day. As attendees filed out, heavy with the imprint of the points argued and conceded, there was a sense among them of history carving its path forward, a path forged not merely by procedure, but by a collective demand for principled action. Walter emerged into the cooling afternoon air, the waning sunlight imbibing new hues through the courtroom windows. His heart echoed the weight lifted with every truth voiced and, indeed, amplified. He didn't need to look outward for hope. It thrived within him, within the eyes of Sheila, Frank, Tanner, and everyone who had come together with unyielding fervor. The moment was etched, crystallized in echoes that pulsated with life, urging each person to ask where would they stand when justice was finally called to account. Do the courtrooms of your mind now feel the urgency to deliberate truth, challenging you to confront complexities and emerge as conduits of change? As the city simmered in the wake of the courtroom revelations, tensions bubbled to the surface, threatening to split public opinion like a fault line prepared to shake the very foundation of societal norms. Conversations sparked within homes, spilled into cafes, and burst from social media feeds, each thread weaving a tapestry of hope and dissonance, unity and division. On one side were those who stood staunchly with Walter Roberts, a chorus of voices united by the pursuit of justice, amplified by Tanner Brooks' groundbreaking exposé and Lieutenant Frank Donovan's brave revelations. To them, the trial was more than an isolated legal skirmish. It was a clarion call demanding a systemic overhaul, a purge of pervasive shadows lurking within corridors of power. On the opposite side, a faction had begun to rally, led by figures whose trust in traditional systems was deeply entrenched. These individuals, rocked by the implications of the trial, saw the potential shifts as threats to stability, their visions clouded by fears of chaos, should the force meant to protect them falter. Within neighborhoods, the divides became palpable. Streets once filled with congenial exchanges were now battlegrounds of ideological warfare, with conversations teetering between passionate discourse and heated argument. The line between ally and adversary blurred, friends pausing to reconfirm loyalties before engaging in conversations previously filled with camaraderie. In the heart of this turbulence lurked an unwelcome undercurrent, voices whispering backlash, urging allegiance to tradition, a return to social order once accepted as sacrosanct. For them, the police department symbolized not systemic oppression, but a necessary arm of justice, whose wounds they believed festered in the name of safety. In this escalating tension, community leaders recognized the need for dialogue beyond the confines of allegiance, understanding that reconciliation often started with open, albeit uneasy, conversations. Several town hall meetings were hastily convened. Walter, though weary from the intensities of trial and turmoil, attended these gatherings with an impassivity born from experience. He was a figurehead, not just for his allies, but for everyone with a stake in these transformative times. His presence spoke of a willingness to listen, to engage even adversarial voices, an embodiment of change not through force, but through fostering understanding. These meetings were arenas where truth and belief clashed, molded by the unshared experiences of those assembled. They bore witness to emotional confessions, the fear of insecurity, chronicles of trust eroded, declarations of hope for a new community bonded by transparency rather than tradition. Amidst the discord, voices found common ground in shared humanity. Personal stories transcended political lines. Tears unveiled among strangers bred a fragile camaraderie. Walter found himself stepping into the role not just of a leader, but of a mediator, crafting pathways to understanding in the fragmented consciousness of those present. Addressing the contradicting sentiments, he spoke with an intensity both soft yet commanding. "Fear divides us because it feeds upon the shadows where truth is hidden," he expressed, his voice a beacon amid silent reflection. To uncover those truths, we must walk together into the light, as uncomfortable as it might be. But despite his best efforts, not all hearts were ready to reconcile. There remained those who clutched tightly to long-held beliefs, their unwillingness to see beyond their paradigms, clouds obscuring a rising sun. To Walter, the work lay not just in the monumental shifts, but in the microscopic bridging of individual tales, the whispered truths carried by footprints along humbled pathways. He understood that every ripple of justice released didn't erase currents of dissent instantly, but, with time, could perhaps redirect them toward unity. In the days following, news of violence simmered beneath the town's surface. Adults deliberating over children with hearts eager but confused, seeking guidance illuminated by dusk-fading lanterns of worn community. Online, polarization sharpened further still, conversations morphing into digital deliberation without the humanizing touch of face-to-face interaction. Social media became battlegrounds where camaraderie faltered under the weight of callous anonymity. Yet fragmented truths forged new alliances amidst the discord. Gazing across the horizon, Walter saw not merely chaos, but potential, bruised yet spirited, gripping the cusp of possibility. This was not an end, but a continuation of dialogues reiterated throughout history, a silent yet impassioned plea for justice articulated through individual journeys to collective understanding. The cacophony preceding peace roared, inviting all to weigh their voices against the cacophony, engraved by choices, not to destroy, but to build upon this burgeoning dawn of healing and transformation. Amid these widening schisms, do you feel your place? A choice tethered by understanding or swayed by lingering confrontation. How will you ensure your voice remains a unifying chord amidst the rising crescendo? As the pursuit of justice relentlessly marched forward, the personal costs began to unfold. exacting their toll on those who had chosen to stand at the forefront of this monumental struggle. For many, the battle extended beyond public forums and into the intimate recesses of personal lives, testing the limits of resilience and unity. Sheila Martin, the dedicated young attorney, had become both a lightning rod and a beacon. Her relentless drive and unyielding belief in the cause had earned her admiration and respect within the movement. Yet this pursuit of justice was not without sacrifice. Late nights in the office, poring over case files and briefing documents, meant missed family gatherings and an ever-growing distance from friends who could no longer relate to the intensity of her mission. Sheila felt the weight of her role, each victory tempered by an ever-present exhaustion. Personal threats had become part of her routine, unsettling reminders of the dangers associated with challenging powerful systems. Anonymous messages slipped under her door, punctuated not just with malice, but with insidious assumptions that she would turn away from her convictions out of fear. Yet despite it all, Sheila found strength in the unity and determination of those who stood alongside her, a collective fortress of solidarity that no amount of intimidation could breach. For Tanner Brooks, the relentless journalist who had brought previously hidden truths to light, the battle was fought within both the public sphere and his own conscience. While his investigative piece had galvanized action and prompted necessary discourse, the resultant fracture between public perception and traditional narratives unleashed a personal dilemma, a storm of introspection regarding journalistic ethics and the broader implications of his work. The pressure to maintain objectivity amidst polarizing opinions pressed heavily on Tanner's shoulders. His private life suffered. The toll of constant vigilance and the knowledge that his revelations were the catalyst for both public division and potential reconciliation, wrapping him in a loneliness only those in his line of work could fully understand. Amidst this tumult, Lieutenant Frank Donovan too bore the brunt of stepping beyond the line. Within the precinct, glances once filled with camaraderie now bordered on accusatory. Whispers lingered in hallways as colleagues grew wary, even hostile, towards a man they once considered an ally. His family life became a delicate balance between protecting his loved ones from the backlash and ensuring they understood the greater good guiding his actions. The psychological toll on Frank bore deep, reality etched into the creases of his face, yet he found solace in fleeting moments of connection, in the understanding gaze of his partner, the quiet moments shared with his children, where words of reassurance laid the groundwork for future generations to know justice's true cost. And, intertwined with their plight, was Walter Roberts, whose steadfast commitment often left little room for personal healing. His every public appearance, though powerful, was a reminder of a lifetime entangled in struggle. The protests, the hearings, the incessant scrutiny. Walter faced them with the weight of history pressing against him, yet he soldiered on, holding tight to the hope that this sacrifice was laying the groundwork for change, not just for him but for countless others. Yet amidst the challenges there were quiet victories, a renewed sense of purpose, the depth of solidarity rooted in shared mission. Late-night strategy sessions morphed into bonding rituals, the collective pursuit sharpening connections not just professionally but in friendship, forged through adversity. These personal costs, profound and often solitary, underscored the unique interplay between action and consequence. Each individual, steadfast in their struggle, understood the necessity of personal sacrifice for the sake of communal healing. They carried with them the stories of those who came before and the vivid potential of those yet to come, tempering every hardship with hope. The broader community, galvanized by the sacrifices made in their name, rallied around these icons of courage, providing tangible support meals delivered spontaneously, notes of encouragement slipped under doors, mutual aid funds established to bolster spirits and carry financial burdens without the expectation of repayment. The narrative of sacrifice continued to ripple through the community, each gesture of kindness a brick in the bastion of resistance and resilience. The struggle for change was vast and demanding, but it was also populated with instances of warmth and humanity, interwoven through threads of fierce determination. As night fell upon the city, cloaking the tireless advocates in its embrace, they each paused to consider their individual pathways. paths illumined not only by sacrifice, but by the myriad possibilities each step toward justice held for themselves, and for those who would follow. Can you see through the prism of sacrifice now, illuminated by hope's flame and driven by the collective resolve to shift history? What costs are you prepared to bear in pursuit of the justice and community we all yearn for? As the courtroom battle ground on, introducing witnesses and uncovering evidence, a surprising and pivotal moment arrived, as an expert in animal behavior was called to the stand. Dr. Hannah Lowell, a renowned zoologist with a specialty in canine psychology, adjusted her glasses and faced the jury, bringing a whisper of scientific intrigue to a trial dominated by human experiences. Her presence promised to unravel the complexities of Razor, the canine who defied his handler's commands during Walter's confrontation and had become yet another symbol in the larger fight for justice. In a trial rooted in systemic injustice, the dog's surprising choice held heavier implications than many had anticipated. Dr. Lowell began with a calm and authoritative explanation of animal behavior, using simple language to break down complex instincts and conditioning, transporting the jury and spectators into an oft-overlooked perspective, the mind of a well-trained police dog whose choices transcended blind obedience. Canines are often viewed through the lens of instinct and trained response, she explained, meeting the gaze of each juror decisively, but they also possess an intrinsic ability to read human emotions and situations based on empathy rather than rote conditioning. With artful precision, Dr. Lowell outlined the training sessions led by Officer Carla Espinoza, highlighting pivotal differences between empathy-driven training and the more traditional, aggressive approaches that the department favored. She painted Razor not as a rogue outlier, but as the insightful culmination of Carla's empathy-based teachings, a testament to alternative training that values understanding over dominance. The courtroom listened with rapt attention as Dr. Lowell's testimony gently unfurled, revealing how Razor's decision to pause, to shepherd compassion instead of aggression, was not a failure, but a testament to understanding one's duties with more than just learned aggression. What occurred that day was not just a breach, but a revelation, she continued, her voice unwavering despite the gravity of her claims. Razor recognized something beyond mere physical threat. He perceived Walter Roberts not as a target but as a human being, and responded accordingly. This choice reflects a capacity for empathy we should nurture, not dismiss. Her revelations struck a chord within the courtroom's stillness. The recognition of Razor's action as a harbinger of possible reform within training regimes rippled through the room. Murmurs turned into hushed contemplations as those present absorbed the implications of her testimony, especially the officers who suddenly found themselves questioning the past certainties upon which their actions were built. Walter, sitting at the front, watched the audience intently, the stirrings of hope evident in his eyes. The prosecution attempted to downplay the testimony's impact, pushing back with inquiries meant to cast doubt on Razor's anomalous behavior as a one-time occurrence. But Dr. Lowell stood firm, articulating with scientific surety and unwavering conviction. In cross-examination, she deftly parried their questions, turning potential pitfalls into clarion points on training evolution and police-community relations hinging on respect rather than authority wielded through force. The jurors, processors of human passion and precision alike, were left with the striking realization that empathy's roots run deep, legitimacy found even in the most unexpected corners of existence, within the bond shared between soldier and dog amid chaotic stances. Beyond the courtroom's somber walls, the testimony curved outward like ripples across a pool of public opinion. An empathetic canine had bridged more than just a situational divide. It spotlighted the expansive potential for reform across institutions still clinging to outdated practices that prized submission over understanding. As the day drew to a close, Sheila Martin reflected on the many layers of struggle they confronted daily. Systems and stories now imbued with fresh dimensions of empathy. Renewed vigor threaded her approach, for Dr. Lowell's testimony was not just a strategic advantage, but a reaffirmation. Justice need not be born of confrontation, but could rise from shared compassion, one breakthrough at a time. For the public, including those who had yet to embrace the movement's burgeoning aims, empathy became its rallying cry, a tie that united all involved, human and canine, in a shared pursuit of justice that, while sometimes opaque, remained never out of reach. With this renewed narrative, this whimsical rebellion found in mutual understanding, the stage was set for further revelations to emerge, a stage where justice, fused with compassion, could no longer be ignored, calling each heart, each mind, to examine its role in shaping this evolving tale. Have you too felt the whisper of empathy's call resonating within, urging a deeper understanding and examination of the narratives dictating perceptions of justice? As the courtroom drama unfolded and public discourse reached fever pitch, the key players in this transformative struggle found themselves facing threats that loomed as dark undercurrents beneath their righteous drive. While the growing momentum towards justice brought many allies to Walter's side, it also incited fear in those who felt threatened by the looming paradigm shifts. Sheila Martin's days were now punctuated with unease, the details of her life suddenly public property, scrutinized by opponents, threatened by the power of her advocacy. Her inbox was flooded with emails, some filled with gratitude and encouragement, others spewing vitriol and thinly veiled threats that sought to unsettle her purpose. Late nights at the office revealed strange shadows, and figures lurking too long by her car quickened her heartbeat, an uninviting reminder of the disquiet hidden within societal change. Even her home, once a sanctuary of quiet reflection, had become a battleground. She was awoken by unsolicited late-night calls meant to intimidate, the whispered threats as insidious as the oppressive systems she fought against. Yet Sheila's resolve, more steely than ever, remained unyielding, a testament to her determination to forge ahead, bolstered by the belief that a force of allies surrounded her, each word of encouragement a shield against fear's encroaching march. Lieutenant Frank Donovan faced a similar gambit. Within the precinct's traditionally brotherhood-bound walls, silence became a tactical language, a way for those opposing reform to express disdain without overt confrontation. Cold shoulders and barely masked hostility shadowed his movements, and he knew too well these quiet rebukes masked a deeper intolerance within ranks once considered family. Frank's home was not spared from this silent aggression. A knock on the door late in the night revealed a message threatening and vague slipped under a rock on his porch, a warning, or perhaps a plea to cease his truthful divulgence. It served as a concrete emblem of betrayal from within, a fracture in the alliance he once fortified. Yet, amidst these shadow games, a community rallied. By contrast to the vitriol, neighbors approached with supportive words and offers to watch over his home. Mutual aid networks offered wisdom on counterbalancing those who thrived on fear-mongering with community fortification. For Walter, however, the threats hearkened more personally, stirring the ghosts of struggles past. While he'd always been a linchpin for his community, the crosshairs widened beyond criticism to menace. A knock at the door brought not comfort, but envelopes filled with bile-laden messages, on occasion accompanied by rocks through his window, a sadly predictable response to his unshakable visibility. Each note was marked by words intended to unravel him, offerings of malice that nonetheless served only to strengthen his commitment. For Walter, suffering these indignities prompted not withdrawal but defiance, serving as further manifestation of his life spent surpassing limits they believed intrinsic. He leaned heavily into the folds of his community, his steadfast presence a reminder of why these struggles mattered. They were etched into his every breath and memory. The culmination of fear and vitriol threatened to cast long shadows over their cause, but where darkness attempted incursion, light fought valiantly. Anonymous threats often paved twofold roads. injecting uncertainty yet clarifying the strength found in shared resolve. In secret meetings, allies like Tanner Brooks worked tirelessly behind the scenes, validating the pivotal role of a free press, which not only highlighted injustices, but protected truth seekers under cover of public transparency. This exposure was a crucial narrative shield, a deterrent against intimidation. Rallies became not just forums for protest, but platforms for resilience. People took the stage, sharing their own experiences with intimidation, breathing them into the public narrative with unbridled solidarity. This innovative reframe transformed what sought to isolate into collectivized empowerment, fortifying through shared stories. As this grim undercurrent unfolded, measures were taken. Liaison groups, intertwined with local law enforcement, ensured that threats were recorded and confronted with due diligence. Legal protections, bolstered with public pressure, demanded accountability from authorities, dispatches of justice, not merely for posterity, but as proactive resistance. The personal struggles and protective measures transcended mere defense. They were the very bedrock upon which this burgeoning movement stood. It was amid the veiled chaos that individuals like Sheila, Frank, and Walter drew strength, transforming fear into action, a triumphant declaration against those yearning for the shadows to prevail. Through these trials, a renewed commitment emerged. The battle wasn't rhetoric, but reality, fortified not just by public outcry, but the illuminated bonds of fellowship. As threats sought to dismantle unity, the harvest of courage proved fertile, inviting not just prosecution but transformation of environmental narratives, untainted and unstoppable. Do you find yourself drawn into this struggle, seeing the fortitude woven through stories of resistance? And in recognizing these shadows, does it inspire your voice to join the resounding call to action against forces seeking oppression over transparency? As the sun set into a horizon painted with hues of determination and defiance, the city inhaled deeply, a collective breath in anticipation of what was to come. A rally had been organized, not just as another protest, but as a demonstration of unity and resilience. A loud declaration that the voices demanding justice would not be silenced. The square was vibrant with life, bustling with people of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs, having converged into a potent tapestry of hope and change. Banners waved bravely in the cooling breeze, messages of solidarity, conviction, and dignity stood stark against the encroaching night. The stage, draped in lights, awaited speakers whose words would punctuate the fight with both fire and grace. Walter Roberts found himself at the heart of the gathering, enveloped in waves of support and compassion that swept over him, promises woven from community spirit. To them, he was not only a symbol, but a living testament to the power of endurance. They had watched him fight and now fought alongside him, their voices meeting his in a symphony of relentless resolve. The rally began with music, soul-stirring melodies that traversed the air and settled into the bones of each listener, grounding them in the legacy of struggles past and emboldening them for those still ahead. As night enveloped the city, the rally became a beacon against the darkness, shimmering with the unyielding light of unity. Local leaders, activists, and artists took to the stage, imbuing the microphone with their stories and aspirations, each speech a brushstroke on the canvas depicting a brighter tomorrow. Sheila Martin's words flowed with customary passion, electrifying the audience with her call for unwavering vigilance. Every battle fought and every truth revealed has brought us to this moment, she commanded, her voice soaring above the murmur of the crowd. We rally not just for ourselves, but for the generations that follow, so that they may inherit not a world of silence, but one of profound and transformative justice. The crowd erupted in agreement, the air crackling as energy transferred from the spoken word to action, evolving from an idea to lived revolution. But it wasn't Sheila alone who moved the hearts gathered there. Tanner Brooks shared his journey stories, uncovered, risk embraced, and how truth had found its voice within the uncertainties of journalism. Frank Donovan followed, the stage seemingly modest beneath his resolute presence. "I stand before you not just as a servant of the law," he declared, "but as a man called upon by conscience to lift my voice alongside each of yours. Together we forge a new path, one defined by trust, reform, and empathy over hostility." Speaker after speaker, the rally became an orchestra of conviction where each tale of courage harmonized with the chorus of defiant cheers. Children stood atop their parents' shoulders, eyes wide with the burgeoning understanding of the world they were inheriting, their innocence lending a poignant promise of change yet to come. Then the moment for Walter arrived, the sun having fully submerged beneath the horizon, yielding the sky to a constellation of stars, now appearing one by one. His voice, a steady rhythm interwoven with the echoes of countless lives touched by his story, rose into the night, a clarion call, echoing from within a heart forged from persistent love and transparency. "In this crowd, I see faces not just of supporters, but of fellow architects," Walter proclaimed, his voice unwavering and imbued with quiet authority. "We build not from anger, but from hope, not from opposition, but from connection. Together we carry the lantern of justice, not ignoring the shadows, but dispelling them, bold and unafraid." The square reverberated with applause, tears of appreciation and resilience shining like dew beneath the moonlight. Walter's words stitched them together thread by thread, holding fast in the belief that this wasn't just a rally, but the building blocks of an indomitable fortress of change. As the speeches wove together, a new chant arose from the crowd, a spontaneous eruption of Unity One that spiraled into the night, reaching beyond geographical limits to resonate with all who had, even from afar, become a part of the movement. This chant, a heartbeat binding the crowd, served as an incessant reminder that their struggles were not in vain. The rally transitioned from fiery demonstration to gentler, quieter farewells as the night deepened. It left in its wake inspired resolve and actionable paths, sending ripples of empowerment far beyond the confines of the square. In witnessing such undeniable solidarity, where do you find yourself woven into the tapestry of change? How will you amplify the call for justice within your sphere so that the rally's echoes can continue cascading across boundaries, inspiring fearless solidarity? In the days following the rally that had breathed fresh life into the movement, a shocking revelation emerged from within the very walls of the police precinct. A betrayal uncovered a deep-seated scandal that rocked the foundation of the department and confirmed suspicions long whispered about corruption and collusion at the highest levels. The impact of this exposure sent shockwaves not just through the city, but across the nation. The exposé began with an anonymous tip, a packet of documents left on Sheila Martin's doorstep, containing internal memos and communications pointing to systemic collusion between certain officers, local officials, and powerful businessmen. The documents painted a damning picture of a department willing to condone racial profiling and abuse of power in exchange for favors, promotion, and financial enrichment. Sheila, already fueled by the momentum of the rally, quickly mobilized her team, and the contents of that envelope soon filled the walls of their office, each paper pinned with notes, dates, and connections drawn out in precise red lines. It was like piecing together a dark puzzle that, once complete, would reveal a portrait of betrayal spanning years, a betrayal affecting countless lives and denying justice to innumerable victims. Tanner Brooks received an anonymous call soon after from someone identifying themselves only as an officer within the department. This informant corroborated the document's validity, adding details about secret meetings and illicit exchanges that had sustained these dishonest practices for years. Encouraged, yet wary, Tanner doubled down on his research, tapping into networks of current and former police personnel who had harbored suspicions but felt powerless until now to act. As the details came together, the public reveal of the scandal through a series of explosive articles backed by irrefutable evidence dropped like a bombshell. The media firestorm consumed the city, and public faith in its police department plummeted to unprecedented lows. Anger and betrayal wove thick through the community, especially among those who had believed their safety had been the priority of those sworn to protect them. Within the precinct, the tension, once bubbling beneath the surface, exploded into overt confrontation. Many officers were enraged by the duplicity of their superiors, feeling tainted by association, their honor slighted by those who played fast and loose with the law. The betrayal revealed divisions between those who believed in reform and those who had silently benefited from or been complicit in the corruption. Amid this chaos, Frank Donovan found himself in the eye of the storm. Officers whom he once called brothers and sisters, now shackled by the weight of suspicion, and yet were turning to him, seeking guidance on how to navigate this new and strange terrain where honor seemed not only tested but trampled. This new reality positioned Frank as a reluctant leader, his integrity now central to rebuilding trust both internally and with the public. The scandal scrambled political power structures too, shaking stalwarts and prompting resignations from officials long suspected of having ulterior motives. City Hall was no longer a fortified refuge, but an institution under siege. Politicians scrambling to save face whilst the March for Justice doubled down its attack, emboldened by the incrimination of those who had wielded power recklessly. For Walter, the unfolding spectacle was both painful and validating. As newscasts chronicled the disease of corruption that had festered under the surface of civic institutions, his role as an advocate took on an even deeper significance, one not overshadowed by despair, but illuminated by the potential for restorative transformation. In community halls and homes, discussions raged with fervor, tempered by a new awareness that change was not only possible but non-negotiable. Activist strategies shifted gears, transforming public demand into actionable frameworks for systemic reform, driven by transparency and community accountability. This scandal, unleashed by daring disclosure and courageous testimony, became a pivotal turning point, not an end, but a revolutionary change was indeed within their grasp. It empowered those who had grown weary, galvanizing allies to broaden their impact and deepen their resolve. Through the streets, where solidarity once whispered, a resurgence of unity now thundered, promising a rebuilt system not beholden to shadows, but embracing the light of unwavering integrity. It was a monumental step forward, shifting the paradigm from protest to revolution. How does this goosebump-inducing revelation reshape the boundaries of justice in your mind, encouraging you to engage fervently with the truths uncovered and fight for just systems within your realm? In the charged aftermath of the scandal, the city held its breath, eager yet anxious to hear from Walter Roberts himself. Amid the loud clamor of public proclamations and political recalibrations, Walter had maintained a resolute silence, allowing the legal proceedings and revelations to run their course. But now, it felt like time for him to step forward and draw from deep within. The announcement that Walter would finally speak was an electric current, snaking through the community. On the day of his address, the public square was overflowing, a testament to the depths of his silent influence. This was more than a gathering. It was an audience with a man who had become both the heart and conscience of their struggle for justice and reform. On the makeshift stage, Walter appeared a humble yet towering figure, time etched into his expression, a landscape of trials and triumphs marked by quiet dignity. The crowd's roar of welcome swelled, a symphonic embrace that buoyed him toward the microphone, his silence for too long preceding this moment. He scanned the sea of faces, each one a story that echoed his journey, interwoven by shared purpose and collective strength. These faces were his family, known and unknown, bonded by narrative strands unyielding even in adversity. Walter began softly, his voice a melodic timbre enriched by years, carrying both the burdens and strength of history's echoes. I stand before you as someone who has seen the darkness of injustice and the light of community resilience, he began, his words embracing the silence between the crowd's breaths. Today is not just about my voice, but the countless voices of those unspoken that have guided us here. The square listened intently as Walter recounted personal anecdotes, each one painting vivid strokes of experience, of Vietnam's jungled haunts, of returning to a homeland rife with familiar fears, of battles waged on unfamiliar front lines, without the armor of justification. His story, so personal and yet universal, resonated with each listener, as if their narrative danced alongside his. Through pain and struggle, we have learned. Silence is not merely listening's shadow, but a powerful force when united with action. Walter continued, the strength of his convictions igniting the air. This scandal threatens us, because it reveals truths long hidden, but it also strengthens our resolve, reminding us that the light only diminishes darkness when we refuse to turn away. A fresh wave of energy surged through the crowd, grounding them in unison as he laid bare the heart of their journey beyond one man, one protest, one courtroom, to a movement larger than any single contributor. Yet amidst the strength, Walter's voice softened, a lullaby laced with a somber urgency for unity going forward. The pathway to justice is not a straight road, he continued, the weight of wisdom grounding each word. But it is a road we must walk, hand in hand, ensuring no one is left behind. We carry the dreams of those who came before us, and the hopes of those who will follow. The audience, enlivened by his words, surged forward in spirit, eyes gleaming with the promise of action and resolve, echoing the quiet determination that radiated from Walter. He urged them to keep the ideals alive, to remain steadfast against obstacles yet to come, understanding that true change required not only resilience, but imagination and courage to redefine their community's future, to look beyond the immediate scandal and use it as a catalyst for meaningful, systemic transformation, a vision aligning justice with empathy and power with humanity. Today, as we stand on these steps, bathed in the shadows of possibility, let us remember that this is not our final chapter, but a prelude to what's possible, Walter concluded, an invocation of hope that hung in the air, coaxing the dawn of a new era to the fore. The applause ignited again, a sonic embrace that sent his message rippling outward, igniting every heart with the persistence needed to carve justice into tangible form. His speech marked a pivotal moment, galvanizing the crowd toward relentless insistence on transformative change, showing them that the road paved by fighters was only just beginning to unfurl its map of promises. Can you hear Walter's call resonate beyond the square, prompting your own quiet determination to speak and rewrite tales of justice within your own communities? As Walter's speech resonated through the hearts of his audience, carrying with it a renewed sense of purpose, storm clouds gathered subtly on the horizon. The communal energy that had bound them together for so long now trembled, tested by the convergence of personal crises and rising public pressures nearing their breaking points. It was a confluence of forces, both internal and external, that demanded confrontation and clarity. Sheila Martin, though invigorated by the public response, now faced an intolerable sacrifice of her own. The relentless pursuit of justice required an emotional reckoning she could no longer defer. Her dedication and long hours had strained relationships with those she loved, family and friends who felt her absence keenly. Meanwhile, the remnants of threatened intimidation loomed larger, a culmination forcing her to confront her well-armored strength against the vulnerabilities she often concealed. These mounting pressures crystallized when she received a late-night call from her younger brother, a staunch ally since the outset. "Sis, we miss you. I just worry about how much of yourself you're giving up." His voice was a tangle of concern and longing, an unanticipated mirror to truths Sheila had buried beneath litigation and legal fortitude. Elsewhere, Frank Donovan battled conflicting loyalties, haunted by the knowledge that his quest for integrity sparked discord within precinct walls. It was a clash between the ideals he cultivated and the realities he faced from colleagues now turned adversaries. The burden was heavy, harsh words exchanged with trusted peers now isolating him. A warrior trudging along a moral battlefield, uncertain of available allies beyond shadowed edges. Personal confrontations intensified his turmoil. Coming home one evening, Frank found himself facing his teenage daughter, her usually bright eyes dimmed with frustration. "Why are you doing this, Dad? Everyone at school talks about how you're going against your own," she challenged. The inquiry a blend of confusion and teenage rebellion, crafting a sharper point than expected. His breath caught, heart tugged between familial duty and love for justice. "Sometimes doing the right thing feels wrong at first," Frank replied softly, "but that doesn't mean we should stop trying. They want us to be afraid of change, but change is necessary." While these personal battles raged internally among the movement's leaders, an external storm brewed. The authorities, reeling from scandal and exposure, sought aggressive retributions, positioning themselves defensively amidst calls for transparency. This backlash wasn't unexpected, but arrived with an intensity that threatened even the strongest of frontiers, they imagined. Anonymous threats escalated to overt pressure tactics, targeting institutions and individuals who posed their allegiances against entrenched tradition, a power structure fighting valiantly not for justice but for status quo preservation. In every village and city, now echoing with the rally's effect, reignited protests sprang forth, demanding widespread reform across not just police departments but education and health systems. It was a tidal wave of expectancy crashing into traditional bastions, old stories now challenged by audacious chapters longing to be written. Caught amidst these realities was Walter Roberts himself, the embodiment of an enduring struggle spanned across generations. Introspections formed silently in his heart, a volatile mixture of promise and protest welding themselves to his narrative. The pressure from these rivers of momentum, overlaid with not just responsibility but profound questions, how much more was required of him? How deeply could his soul bear the communal burdens, urging forth change without losing part of himself, crafted and refined from earlier battles fought, or surrendering beneath the groaning barometer of justified succession? In answering these internal pleas, neither quest nor soldier duty faltered, but Walter and his allies recognized this breaking point for what it was: the cost of driving transformation, embedded in risking comfort and embracing vulnerability. Yet the moment held more than divisions and personal strife. It contained raw potential, waiting to catch fire, to renew and rebuild, not through uniformity alone, but confident pluralism. As Walter glanced out from the porch of his modest home that evening, reflecting on Walter's speech just days prior, he understood this deeply, that each challenge faced was a notable echo of tradition-wielding resistance against reform's appeal. This breaking point, then, was not an ending, not merely a place of decisive conflict, but potentially profound transformation, buoyed by people leaning into courageous empathy, where opposition forged unexpected alliances and justice became the song their hearts synchronized to, home together. And woven within the silence following shattered ideologies, one straightforward yet immeasurable question lingered. Are you ready to accept this call? Facing both person and system, to reclaim justice so long denied, yet never beyond recall. Are you inspired to join Walter? Understanding each identity interlaces within this awakening struggle, knowing the most challenging hours lead not to defeat, but to resurgence and redefinition. Walter Roberts sat alone on his porch, hand held tightly clasped around a photo of his younger self, a time-worn image from his days in service overseas. The dusk deepened around him, shadows stretching over a world he had spent a lifetime trying to shape for the better. But this evening felt different, laden with expectation, foreboding, and the weight of revelation that lingered just at the edge of his recognition. The town was quiet, yet within this silence thrummed an intensity, a promise of truths unspoken, perched to unravel like the stars beginning to glimmer above. Walter sensed it, an evolution born of legacy and proximity, a twist of fate knit into his path so pointedly it couldn't be ignored. His phone buzzed softly, and as he answered, the familiar voice of Sheila Martin came through, filled with an urgency that masked the late hour. "Walter," she began, a tremor in her usually composed tone, "I've come across something, documents, linking Vietnam veterans to a special pilot project during the war involving K-9 units." The words triggered a subconscious reflex, unlocking something buried in the vault of Walter's memory, a connection he hadn't anticipated, yet one now springing to light like dawn's certain lilt. "Spit it out, Sheila," Walter urged, his heart quickening like flutters between chapters of one's own story rediscovered in newfound context. Sheila's words spilled forth in quiet amazement, weaving archives into a vivid fabric of recognition. "I think Razor is connected to this project, Walter. It seems there was an experimental unit formed using bonds forged in Vietnam to train K9S with veterans as part of their rehabilitation when they returned stateside." The revelation was a lightning bolt, illuminating Walter's mindscape with flashbacks of toned barks, whispered commands, and unsolved companionship, easily overlooked yet profoundly unique. During his deployment, there'd been a unit and unofficial collaboration, intricate in both intuition and allegiance. Walter could still recall the pride of canine partnerships, the unwavering dedication reflected back into human eyes in a landscape where ambiguity reigned. Listening now, he saw not only Congress-formulated regulations, but conscious compassion modeled alongside protection, soldier and dog, wading through moral twilight toward empathy, laced with survival. As Sheila outlined further details, the depth of this connection expanded in scope and gravity. Razor, the canine at the heart of their current struggle for justice, potentially shared a legacy Walter himself had inadvertently helped forge. Animal and human empathy operant long before advocacy within those boundaries broadened the societal frame, the implications rippled through Walter, a map of historical intersections between the ongoing quest for justice and a backstory now resurfaced. He had unwittingly stroked the tendril that led to the very core of his past, and within this converging fate, an unexpected ally emerged. In a world built on perception, here was complexity, a bond transcending years, encompassing love and loyalty not lost but waiting to be rediscovered. With each passing second, Walter's vision crystallized, a thin line woven through the tapestry of resistance, now connecting two worlds where hope had forged its imprint. His silent advocate, a dog saluting humanity with rare defiance, sparking change unasked for, yet irrevocable. Rising from his porch, his legs steady beneath the weight of his newfound understanding, Walter felt a resurgence of resolve. Fate, which seemed random in its capricious twists, had revealed a purpose touching not merely upon the immediate struggle, but hinting at roots deeper, mycelial connections ready to bloom within dormant soils of justice long sought and tended. This shift, powerful yet grounded, altered Walter's comprehension of where the journey led not just personally but for the community. As stars filled the endless canopy above, twinkling their distant promises upon a night no longer defined by shadows, he pondered not what was to come, but what he would actively embrace in each new dawn. Do you too feel this awakening through Walter's eyes, realizing every unconcealed truth or unexpected ally deepens the capacity for empathy, inviting renewed vigilance upon an ever-evolving path toward justice? What stories lay dormant within your pursuit of fairness and understanding, seeking light beneath recognized constellations? The echoes of such profound revelations reverberated through the courtroom as the next phase of this saga unfurled, one that began shifting the scales toward redemption and restitution. It was a morning charged with anticipation and solemnity as attendees filtered into their seats, ready for another chapter that promised not only resolution but also the promise of change. Inside the courtroom, Sheila Martin stood ready, buoyed by the revelations surrounding Razor and Walter's intertwined past. The revelations offered a new perspective, a kinetic force to elevate the discourse from outrage to reform. Key changes now depended not solely on punishment, but on the ability to reshape the systems that enabled such systemic failings. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered, the gravity of the moment settling like dust at sunset over the gathered assembly. All eyes were drawn forward, anticipation tugging every heartstring in expectance of history being rewritten, or, at least, thrust forcefully into the arms of justice. Sheila presented the closing arguments with an impassioned clarity, skillfully weaving together the threads of courage and deceit, unraveled over the past weeks. What we urge is not just consequence, but consideration, she articulated, every word balanced between challenge and invitation. Redemption comes only through acknowledgement, restitution through responsibility. Only by accepting the weight of these truths do we pave the way to meaningful transformation. Lieutenant Frank Donovan took the stand once more, this time not as just a truth-teller or adversary, but as an advocate for change within his very institution, a counterpoint to inertia that struck resonantly like a well-timed chord among the jurors' deliberation. "I've seen both sides of this scorned treaty between duty and deceit," Frank offered, his voice unwavering. "Reform does not tear down. It rebuilds, with the strength of honesty and the clarity of responsibility. A future marked by accountability and trust is possible if we only choose courage over complacency." These words cast light not only on outcomes desired, but future commitments anticipated by all invested in the outcome. It was no longer just about casting judgment, but coming together as a community and repairing the social tapestry torn by corruption and betrayal. There was a palpable shift within the courtroom. A subtle scaffolding erected through the voices invested in change process, transforming not into punishment alone, but proactive proposal, as all parties involved backed eventual reconciliation with solemn optimism, marked by Walter's spirit and Razor's legacy. When the verdict was finally read, a collective sigh released across the room, palpable relief, intertwining with moments of solemnity, for what lay heavy, rectified through hard-fought truths. Consequences were pronounced, perpetrators held accountable, restitution enacted for those disenfranchised. Police training programs were mandated to be overhauled, empathetic methodologies informed by people like Officer Carla Espinoza reintroduced, and veteran involvement in advocacy campaigns mandated, ensuring experiences so dearly paid for with time and bravery weren't surrendered in memory's silence. Walter, again a steadfast shadow amid triumph's light, bore witness to redefining change where scars once seared. He was one part architect, one part steward, in a story that continued to envelop justice's transformative horizon. But while penalties were a necessary resolution, it was renewal that everyone left the courtroom whispering. Policies redressed, reformed, reborn. Amid revelations newfound, yet intrinsically understood by those like Walter, in corridors beyond the court, whispers of the vote of revolution filled halls and hearts. Allied stories wove a newly gifted fabric around community pillars. Each family's testament preached this labor of resolve, daring others to take solace not in yesterday's chaos, but steadily moving toward shared hope and tomorrow's design. And deeply ingrained lessons stretching back across vistas, across years, assured Walter that heroes aren't always defined only by grand gestures, but by voices raised wisely in harmony, forged alongside the willing hands holding justice's lamp upright amid rigor's path, and separating trite judgment from faded redemption. Humanity's cadence held a prime note, a drumbeat of recovery, as bonds of empathy proved anew their genuine worth against the antiquated storm, illuminating their shifted horizon together, gracefully enduring into legacy born right. Through Walter's Odyssey, where does the path of hope within you tread amid our global desire for livelihood and light? Which songs beckon your heart to lift within this rediscovered calling, offering beacons of compassion flanked by futures revived upon united faith? With the weight of the courtroom battle still fresh in their minds, Walter Roberts and his allies emerged into the sunlight, a world waiting expectantly outside those doors, a world that had forever shifted like tectonic plates upon which their community was built. There was no denying that the bond they had forged in the fires of conflict had tempered them into a tighter, more resolute force. Attention turned to healing, rebuilding, and nurturing a community that had been bruised but was now fiercely unified. The seeds of change, planted in the fertile soil of advocacy and empathy, began to sprout, offering promise of new beginnings and rejuvenation. Walter's home became a hub of activity, a place where plans and hopes took shape under the watchful eyes of those determined to rebuild. It was here that community meetings were held, where elders shared wisdom won through years of struggle, and younger voices joined the chorus with fresh ideas and dreams of progress. The discussions were more than just about mending broken ties. They were about fostering an environment where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. Conversations turned from mere reaction to proactive care, considering not only how to address injustices, but how to prevent them from ever arising again. Education became a rallying point. Proposals were drafted to incorporate empathy and historical awareness into school curricula, fostering understanding and respect from an early age. Lovingly termed Razor's Way, the program was designed to instill values of compassion and tenacity, using the story of Razor and Walter as educational touchstones, teaching children that true strength lies in understanding and bridging divides. In collaboration with local veterans, projects were initiated to support and integrate returning servicemen and women into community life. This initiative recognized their struggles and strengths, aiming to transform them into active contributors to community resilience, extending empathy beyond borders and battlefields. Local businesses, new and old, were encouraged to become partners in this renaissance. Racial equity training sessions were scheduled, ensuring that economic growth was anchored in diversity and inclusion. The objective was to create a thriving environment that benefited everyone, stimulating not just economic development, but collective prosperity. Community gardens sprouted up in vacant lots and along formerly neglected alleys. These spaces not only provided sustenance, but flourished as symbols of renewal, places where neighbors gathered, bonded through nurturing growth and shared goals. They represented the transformation possible when varied hands worked in harmony toward a common vision. The police force, undergoing its mandated reforms, began an outreach program, bridging gaps in trust and accountability. Officers were seen not just in patrol cars, but walking through neighborhoods, involved in community events, learning the stories and struggles of those they served. The precinct's walls, once barriers, now featured murals of unity and justice painted by local artists, each stroke a pledge toward cohesion and accountability. Throughout all this, Walter remained a steady beacon, a gentle hand guiding fledgling efforts with the wisdom of experience. He was often seen walking the streets, engaging in earnest conversations with young and old alike, his presence a reminder of the power of enduring commitment. In quieter moments, Walter would reflect on the interconnectedness of their struggles, how each victory was tied to a broader tapestry of resilience. His gaze often found the horizon, a line no longer a boundary, but a bridge to possibility. As the community rebuilt and redefined itself, there was a palpable shift, a recognition that they were crafting not just responses to past wounds, but a future rooted in collaborative strength. The story of Razor and Walter became part of a grand narrative that encouraged everyone to embrace transformation with compassion and resolve. Through their collective journey, the community discovered that redemption lay not only in addressing wrongs, but in forging a shared identity, vibrant and strong in the face of adversity. It was a testament to endurance, rich in its diversity yet singular in purpose, eagerly rewriting its own narrative, one deliberate step at a time. In a world fraught with division, do you feel your role in this evolving harmony? How can your own community, inspired by stories of hope and resilience, be remade into something greater, standing as a testament to unity and compassion? As the community continued its vibrant transformation, the legacy of resilience and action began to settle into everyday life, creating ripples that extended far beyond the city's immediate borders. The changes put into motion by Walter and his allies formed a tapestry interwoven with hope, reform, and a newfound understanding of justice that was not merely conceptual but practical, thriving in the ordinary routines of daily existence. The police department, once a stronghold of inertia, was gradually becoming a model for progressive reform. Officers who had once been enmeshed in a culture of secrecy and aggression now found themselves ambassadors of transparency and accountability. The precinct's new ethos, defined by principles of community engagement and mutual respect, reverberated throughout the city's corridors. A new generation of officers embraced the ethos embodied in Razor's quiet rebellion, demonstrating that duty combined with empathy strengthened communities rather than divided them. Schools became centers of transformation, places where dialogue was encouraged and critical thinking flourished. Razor's Way had become more than a curriculum. It was a way of life that extended beyond textbooks into the hearts of students, teaching them not just academic skills but the importance of standing for justice, understanding differences, and nurturing their communities. This nurturing environment created young advocates ready to confront issues of inequality and foster inclusive dialogues as part of their path into adulthood. The entrepreneurial landscape, too, had shifted significantly. Businesses that embraced equity and inclusivity began to flourish, their success a testament to the power of community-driven economies. The shared gardens thrived, their produce not only feeding mouths but nurturing souls, transforming derelict lots into hubs of activity, where conversations blossomed as naturally as the plants themselves. Walter Roberts continued to play a pivotal role as the catalyst for these changes. Though his days of marching might have waned, his influence endured as he shared words of wisdom with the next line of changemakers. His visits to schools and community centers became treasured events, opportunities for young and old alike to glean insights from a lifetime spent in pursuit of justice. Through all of their struggles, the community, led by Walter's unyielding perseverance and the tangible changes they wrought, became an exemplar, a beacon guiding others on the journey to rebuilding and reimagining their own neighborhoods and institutions. Stories of their achievements spread beyond state lines, whispered through national conversations and forums focused on social justice and reform. Throughout it all, Walter would step back and marvel at how far they had come, remembering the days when it seemed like the fight was overwhelming, the road endless. Yet they had emerged from conflict not by retreating into isolation, but by forging ahead with resolute openness and a willingness to confront hard truths, a triumph not of individuals, but of collective will. In the archives of their success, testimonies from a once divided city now intertwined across myriad lived experiences stood testament to a new normal, one where empathy and action worked in concert to right wrongs long neglected. The journey to justice had become an ongoing dialogue, a continuing narrative, inviting each person to add their unique voice to the chorus of community resilience. Each step forward, each hand extended, rewrote the story of what could be accomplished when people refused to be defined by past mistakes, instead choosing to embrace potential futures with fearless optimism. The movement led by Walter Roberts had done more than shine a light on darkness. It had illuminated pathways, leading toward a shared destiny founded on peace, acceptance, and transformative justice. As they looked to the horizon, the community saw not just the echoes of battles past, but the dawn of something greater, a promise cast within the laughter of children, playing beneath murals layered with history that pledged ongoing unity for generations unschooled but cultivated anew. In the lingering echoes of their progress, does your heart seek to chart your own path toward unity and compassion? How might your contributions shape the luminous future of communities hungry for change, following the legacy of those who have paved the way before you? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the revitalized community, a sense of peace settled over Walter Roberts. Standing at the edge of the community garden, a beloved testament to their collective triumphs, he watched as families gathered. Laughter danced through the air, a melody harmonized by the gentle rustling of leaves and the whispers of the past that had brought them here. The garden, once a barren plot, had blossomed into a verdant testament to renewal. It was a sanctuary crafted by hands united in purpose, a living symbol of how far they'd come, from division to unity, from pain to healing. It bore witness to the fruits of their labor, both literal and metaphorical, as vibrant as the futures they had striven to secure. The sun dipped lower, and as twilight took its place, lanterns flickered on, casting pools of light that mirrored stars now emerging in the vast night sky. Walter rested on a bench, taking in the scene, the embodiment of dreams realized. Despite the battles faced, his heart brimmed with a quiet satisfaction. There was peace not in the absence of struggle, but within the embrace of shared resilience. The legal battles, protests, and reforms were only part of the story. What unfolded around him was the true legacy of their efforts, a community no longer at war with itself, but instead woven together with the threads of respect and understanding. He recalled the early days, when discord and suspicion cast long shadows over their goals. Those shadows had been dispelled by the warm light of empathy, a light tended not by a single flame, but by the collective spark of many souls ignited into action. Turning his thoughts back to Razor, the canine whose simple act of rebellion had ignited a movement, Walter smiled softly. In Razor's defiance lay the profound lesson that had rippled through every aspect of their journey, that sometimes breaking away from the expected path could lead to extraordinary transformation. As the evening deepened, Walter felt a gentle tug at his sleeve and looked down to see a young girl, curious and bright-eyed. She seemed no older than 9 or 10, a child of the new era their struggles had begun to shape. "Mr. Walter," she whispered, her voice a tender note. "Is it true? Did you really stand up to a big dog and not move?" Walter chuckled softly, nodding. "Yes, little one. Sometimes standing firm is what makes the difference. But it's not just the big dogs we face that matter. It's being there for each other that changes everything." Her eyes widened, capturing the reflections of stars overhead, and she nodded with understanding beyond her years. "When I grow up, I want to make a difference like you." He smiled, warmth spreading through him. "You already are," he replied, seeing in her eyes the future he had fought so hard to nurture. The garden now shimmered under moonlight. A gentle tranquility wrapped around the echoes of laughter, and soft conversations whispered through foliage that seemed to lean in to listen. As Walter savored this moment of shared connection, he understood that within each phased ending resided potential beginnings. The community's journey was a testament, a sanctuary of stories unfolding ceaselessly toward greater understanding, one moment at a time. In this embrace of unity and forward momentum, Walter felt more than fulfilled, he felt hopeful. For where there was understanding, there was healing, and where healing dwelled, change flourished. A breeze passed over the garden, rustling leaves to join in the night's symphony, a reminder that while the past informed their story, it was the present that carried it onward. Walter breathed in deeply, exhaling with a soft contentment, and thus encapsulated within night's gentle embrace. This legacy stood not only within the hearts of those who had lived it, but shining as a beacon for those yet to light their lamps from its flame, promising that justice and love were paths destined to widen forevermore. Can you feel their whisper, inviting you to embrace and contribute your own light to this eternal journey, ready to face whatever shadows dare emerge? Does this legacy inspire the quiet determination within you, or stir a deeper sense of purpose in your own life? How might you carry this forward, drawing from their resilience to impact your community and beyond? If you resonate with their journey, like, share, and subscribe to the Black Voices channel together. Let's shape a future narrative defined by human spirit and unyielding justice.